everyone. Okay, I think this is better. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. I want to speak about how, in some point of our evolutionary history and the kind of history we consider that our ancestry around 200,000 years ago in hunter-gatherer societies, like what they experienced. I was wondering about that. And it is true that around that time there were proto-languages. That means not proper languages, but still means of communication accessible. Now, this sort of different Homo sapiens, let's say, in the same tribe, eventually they had to engage one another. You put a bunch of people in a room, they will engage. Now, in their engagements, there came the need to communicate certain things. And I find that the first thing about communication was probably like somebody pointing to someone that there's something there. I find a lot of, like it was as if a kind of sort of hand-based sign language, I find at first. Before words developed, the person would make noise and point maybe at a tiger in the bush or something. Now, hunter-gatherer societies, they maintain procreation and they acknowledge their dead. They buried their dead. They spoke, they built things, they had leaders and they had those who were exiled. And the tribe would update in accordance to the person, the finding that would the person would bring in some sense. Where I kind of am gazing at, what I'm gazing at is that how these proto-languages made the brain have multiple purposes was that they cultivated inner experience. For me, it was a long time. I consider two types of evolution. I consider the subjective evolution and the objective evolution. And the subjective evolution I found out the hard way. It should have been taught to me, but nobody spoke about the mind to me. When I say nobody, I mean not in a way that I could comprehend or use it. At most, any kind of deep question I had in my youth, the response was a story. Always, people were giving me stories everywhere. Eventually, after some point, and I'm speaking with a kind of mindset I have now, the human being realizes the temporary nature of phenomena. That is why love and care and all this stuff has value. Because irrationally, to be cruel makes more sense, does it not? It ensures sooner success. If we all went animal mode right now, that could be like rationally the most violent person gets the most attention. Not the best attention, but I'm saying like like you can totally intensify communication to overwhelm. I have seen this in my life. But the thing is now that our minds are so multi-purposed, they are so multi-leveled that it's incredible. You can be in a bus stop, acknowledging the fact that in the future or in some time you will reach your workspace, and at the same time have this notion of what you're going to do, like next week, or what you did yesterday, or various views of self can be entertained. There was a time where creatures on this planet, as I was saying, the objective evolution was unconscious. The objective evolution became conscious when the subjective evolution began. Do you know? So what does that mean? That means the creature moved separate to the body, but it still wasn't conscious. It was more of a kind of dualistic pattern. You know, it's like scientists do something funny, and to be honest, what it is they make the mathematician their preacher. Now, I have an incredible respect for mathematics and geometry. But what I mean by this is that there is always a language underneath the story, a sort of structure to how meaning occurs. It's kind of like the difference between what is being and what is happening. In the what is happening part, there is the ability of the free will. So I want you to think about it like, to be honest, it's unfathomable. Like we give numbers, but it's unfathomable. There came a time where I was like, there's no way we can tell evolution because the creature might have spent millions of years in a sort of, how can I tell you? There's loops of consciousness. When I say we can't say, I mean like we can't tell how long it took for certain parts of the brain to develop. You know, we see the result when we can assume. You see, the thing is, it's pretty much every historian becomes acquainted to this. It's like the secret silent thing that every historian knows. That at the edge of history, there is a man-made kind of movement. What that means is we sparked history into motion just like we have sparked the greatest films on cinemas. The reason I have chosen to focus on the hunter-gatherer society in this talk because certain developments were made that were very crucial. For example, to bury your dead is another way of saying they were conscious of a sort of the end of life to a degree they didn't. Sometimes I wonder if people buried the dead because they didn't want to see the dead body, you know, or just returning it to the earth. But I'm just trying to think. Nature's moving before any of us. Nature is moving unconsciously. That means there's no individual consciousness yet in the universal sector, at least in regards to man's mind. Now, what happens is this creature becomes aware of itself. We don't know. We can't remember that far back, but somehow we're carrying some sort of genetical pattern that has stretched that long. So it's one of those things that what I'm trying to say is the creature became conscious of itself. Languages weren't developed, but certain sounds were being acknowledged similarly. That means you can say long before people could speak as they are now, it was an acknowledgement of sounds. It was as if people were just hearing the same sound, ah, ah, or like buh, buh, or whatever. Do you know? So it was like an acknowledgement of simple principles, eventually becoming more complex, and eventually they got so complex that man simulated free will. What I mean by that is nature treated itself as separate from itself. In doing so, it opened up the void and infinity to the conscious mind. But at the same time, realizing that you really can't do much with something that's here. To be honest, we philosophers are all at a loss of words, I find, to be honestly. When it comes to what is here, it's not a what, it's just an is. It just is. This instantaneity of attention must be revered beyond language. And so people come and go. The moment I realized I'm temporary, it was as if I got a lottery ticket. I realize it will all end, so what is it here for? To engage, simply. That's what life is here for, guys. It's not here to put you in a sort of costume and tell you, all right, this is your mission, run out in the field. There is not, it's not like that. It's like, don't drive recklessly. In regards to, how can I tell you, it's fear is a sort of intoxication. I'm not joking. Imagine a human being waking up afraid, and imagine a human being that's drunk. That human being who's drunk can't make certain movements. The person who is in some sense a state of mind of fear can't make certain movements. I find eventually in the psychology of the human being, there comes a moment, just a moment where you're alone with yourself. No other words, nothing from other realities. It's just you and universe. And in that moment, originality becomes its first choice. So what does that mean? That means behind my eyes, I have said goodbye to many faces, to many memories, to many designs, many ideas, many moments where a certain thought was lit up in my attention, and I was like, wow, it's like I'm a tourist in my inner realms. This thought is only here today in this way. And to be honest, that's why I got pulled towards sharing these talks, because I noticed, what is the point? What is the point? We're a bunch of creatures on a rock, okay? We were behaving like savage animals until recently we began having greater purposes. But still we are a bit animalistic because that's the nature of our biological program. But at the same time, we have cultural programs. We have the program of social programs, the program of civilization, the story of mankind, which is the key point of it. It's the common denominator. The fact that we are designed, but based on our design, similar. That's the thing. I wouldn't be speaking to the human species if it wasn't similar. It's like, why am I not going and giving talks to like the birds on the tree? You know? Why am I speaking to the human species? Because commonality of design. Commonality of design means we all speak the same language of in some sense human form. I'm speaking simply as a designer, not as a philosopher in this moment. So I find that the attempt, just the fact that they put bunch of people in a room, bunch of these bunch of people in a room in a tribe had to speak. They had to engage. What were they going to do all day? They had to communicate. They had to move. They had to do something, right? So in their movements came the requirement to acknowledge the same thing, which came the acknowledgement and the need for language. So language was born out of the eyes of many people saying the same thing. That is our power. That is our ability with the linguistic realms, but we have forgotten it. Do you know in ancient times people spoke in verse? And I'm not just saying this. It's like written somewhere. It's documented that people were new to language, so they understood their elegance. It's like the guy didn't have his phone to worry about in the day. He's like, oh my God, it's like, forget the games on my phone. Life is a game I'm in. Oh my God. And the guy goes in and in his honesty, he levels up. In his dishonesty, it's like that glitch error in a video game. Like, I was born in 91, so so I experienced a lot of video games where there were glitches in it. The character would reach the edge of the map and his legs wouldn't stop running, and the character was just stuck at the edge of the map, just running endlessly. So a sort of glitch in the meaning. It's so fascinating how much just the behavior of a person changes. It changes the impressions that many people have, right? We hold each other we judge each other in accordance to our actions than our words. I find that means actions hold precedent. That means a member of a tribe back in the day in the hunter-gatherer thing, saving the tribe from a wild beast, right? Like, it was an acknowledgement of value. And so here's the fascinating thing, guys. It's like a bubble. Consciousness is a bubble. but it's a bubble of manifestation. And pretty much this is something like, let me say it like this. The average man, let me say it like this, the common man, he just says, all right, I'm a person, this is a world, this is a day, I go live my day and I come back at night and I sleep. Now, the uncommon man comes and says, wait a minute, in 1/3 of the states of consciousness that I am in, it's as if like there's a heart beating, and then there's this creature who is in a waking state of mind, and then sleeps, goes into a deep sleep state of mind, and then may reawaken in a dream state. So what does that mean? That means 1/3 of your life you're sleeping, you know? Probably 1/3 of it you're lost in your dreams, you know? Imagination takes a lot of the lifetime. And 1/3 of it is the conscious waking time. So what does that mean? That means 2/3 of life is an unknown. 1/3 of life, and I shouldn't say 1/3. Let me say it like this. It's like what I'm trying to say is we as a creature experience different states of mind. By acknowledging this, it means because we're in a changing world, we have to go along with the program of change. Because we have to go along with the program of change, that really means you are a creature that cannot be identified with image. Like even when, for example, like a person looks at their government ID, their like driver's license or something, they see that picture is from that moment. The face in the picture hasn't changed, but who's holding the card has changed. So do you see, it's as if like for the sake of culture and society and where language is led and the effort of our ancestors, we have to take care of civilization. And it's strange because I find like, how can I tell you? This is going to be a strange thing to say, but I find millennials and even previous generations before them to some degree developed more and more in the role of becoming conscious of civilization's mistake and picking up the trash. So you see, trash is not just like an object on the ground. Trash could be a subject in someone's mind. So what I mean by that is that the responsibility to treat yourself for the first time in your lifetime as an unknown mind, not just encapsulated a known body and nothing else. It's like people are being too strict with themselves because you can't really expect evidence in a changing world, not because the evidence can't be found, because the viewer is changing. Do you know what that means? That means it's kind of hilarious, guys. Imagine a scientist, let's say scientist A, right, does an experiment, and we call that experiment A, right, and gets like a result. And now tomorrow, the same scientist comes and does the same experiment, and the experiment, it's like the experiment B, which is, let's say experiment A point. Experiment A, let's say 2.0. Oh my God, I'm making this too complex. What I'm saying is the scientist comes, does an experiment on the first day, gets a certain result. The result has a certain meaning to the scientist. Now, the next day, the scientist sleeps, wakes up, and comes and does the experiment again. The experiment gives the same result, but suddenly something is different about the meaning. The person has changed. So another way of kind of saying this playfully, and I find this is a ingenious approach. Imagine we gave scientists time travel machines, but they could only make leaps in 10 years. So the scientist does something and then makes a leap in 10 years and comes and does the same experiment and eventually realizes it is not the same person that is doing the experiment. So the issue is not just trying to get evidence in a changing world, is to realize everything is changing. Even our physical bodies are changing, right? And like having an ego is pretty much the most eternal thing you can do. A person thinking they're an idea, it's like doesn't get more infinite than that, guys. You're keeping an idea in mid-air. It's only when the presence of your mind becomes as sacred as the holiest temples that you will realize why the eyes are open. What that means is it's not per se an explanation in language, it's a reverse engineering into a silent witness. Now that opens up the mystical door, because when I speak, it's like I'm moving in a building of thought, you know. I simply want to communicate that the hunter-gatherer societies were beginning was it was the birth of a new wave of evolution in human behavior through repetition. You know, and so what that means is, to be honest, the greatest glory, like what politics is teaching, is either the people are together or they're not. That's it. Because people are running everything. And what's funny is people are also running from everything. A system can lie to you. You know, I respect my first bed I had in my life. I respect that room, the first room I had in my life as a person. But I knew that I was not meant to be in that room. So as I even give these talks and just in general, it's like I respect my own vision, but I am not, it's as if I have seen how far the linguistic simulation can go. And then eventually, this is when it's like the thirst is, what's the word, clenched? Not clenched, quenched or something, you know? What I'm trying to say is that eyes were open. There was no words. Eyes opened. And you know, in some sense, there's a totally mystical. I gotta say it just so that I get it out in case I forget it. But it's like, I don't know. It's this notion that time doesn't exist in time. That the edges of the attention are not limited to form. So what does that mean? That means Mr. Within is saying, hey, well, surprise, human species, you are multidimensional beyond your dualistic conception. But we have to find as species a new way of kind of recalibrating to this. What does that mean? That means there has to come. It's like here's the thing: we have to put saving the world aside, technologically, just for 1 second aside. And as a species, we have to wonder about the behavioral influence, because children are either being raised where they feel they can, their free will can move beyond their environment, or they feel it can't go beyond their environment. Either they have the will of the explorer, or they are in some sense the guardian of the past or something, you know? To be honest, in the subtitle, I couldn't fit it, but I wanted to write emerge. I wrote it here on the window. Uh, what is it? Emergence of cooperation. There we go. The emergence of cooperation. What does that mean? That means creatures found each other in the same space, and in doing so became the most powerful species. How fascinating. Everything we see now depended on our ancestors finding each other. Bringing forth tribes, eventually attempting so much communication until their minds could acknowledge a story. Can you imagine the first storyteller ever? The first storyteller ever just made a sequence of a pattern of sound, and all the other beings were like, oh, oh, like caveman, the caveman was freaking out. Like one of the caveman was making a noise that the other caveman couldn't, and imagine the caveman were like, oh my god. what I mean by this is that we can all feel what it's like in being in Jon Snow's shoes from Game of Thrones. It's like, it's not just Jon Snow that knows nothing. It's every human being who wonders where it all started and wonders where it all ends and realizes it ends in a personal way, but it started collectively. It's kind of sad. I find there's certain social servants who retire that it's as if they should be given medals, but they're not. You see, so much of society has to become celebrate. Like, you don't understand. There's a way in certain civilizations have evolved simply by celebrating. In celebrating, they acknowledge the mind of their species, the individual members of the species. In the acknowledgement of the mind of the individual members of the species, from the inner isolation came an external purpose where no longer the being was alone. I find that it's kind of, this may sound a bit extreme, but take it lightheartedly, that it's kind of like we're all in our own worlds, but once we find that the external world is acknowledging us, it's as if, whoa, the inner world is not just left. You see, you gotta live for life to live for life. That living for life part means you're not here to just hear the voice of the human species. You're here to hear the voice of your direct experience of the planetary sector. Treat your mind as a kind of unknown antenna, you know? Do you know how many times in this life I have laughed at my own mind? Do you know how many times? It's uncountable. How many times I've had a thought appear that made no sense, and the thought came in such a random time that it was as if I just stopped the act and I was just laughing. Do you know? It's kind of like, I kind of feel like it's the true nature of the person calls them towards their mind. The artificial nature of the person calls them towards an embodiment. So we can say pretty much the mind can be divided between being and happening, or you can say expressing and receiving, or grabbing and letting go. So to be honest, when I'm speaking right now, I'm telling you, it's like, I, in order for me to speak at a higher speed, I'm not joking, like seriously, at a higher speed of conception, I can't put the conception in a cage. This is why I would try it, and it becomes like, I can't, like, if there's something about planning the future that forbids the future, which is a limitation on one's intelligence. So planning must be done momentary, just like the lion gets hungry, it goes to eat. Similarly, plans of actions, efforts of energetic intention should also, like, the species is moving from this. It's like one character in a story to every moment a new character in a story, new story, new character, new story, new character, new story, new character. At some point, man looks at time. It's like, time. What are you doing, time? Like, why are you running all the time? You know. And imagine the Lord of Time says, none of your business. The Lord of Time would say, to man's eyes, I am the direction. But to my eyes, there is no direction. Time, just like a person puts on their watch, they also put on certain ideologies that relate to their experience. I find, first, man has to become aware that he's an objective phenomena and study that. After the person has studied the objective phenomena, then it becomes a sort of, how would I say it? Just a second. Your objective dimension, very simple. Respect it. This is strange, but I have this view on healing that because the mind is here, the body is not the body, so the mind communicates, heals the body through communicating to it as itself. So what I mean by that is like, just because I tell people that we, as a species, we must move beyond the language threshold, it's an important point in history. It's not the evolution of the greatest technologies. That's going to be like, as Ray Kurzweil says, in 2050. But right now, it is the evolution of the language of the mind of man, which means the data processing power of man's vision is becoming incredibly next level. So it's like, even if we consider the child, let's forget like a Buddhist perspective of reincarnation, and let's just entertain that a child that enters this world is a blank slate. This blank slate nowadays, this child will enter the world and open its eyes and get stormed by data. Like, I'm not joking, guys. I have a cousin who I saw an iPhone in his hand when he was really young. And I went to my aunt and I'm like, don't take away this iPhone from this kid. Two things you got to consider: the eyes of the child. The child is not smart enough to know how far its eyes should be from the phone. And the second thing is, what did I say? I said the content of the phone. And I told her, like, just don't give your child this. And the next time I saw my cousin and I went to speak to him, this really young kid, he was all about winning, 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 winning. And I'm like, holy shit, how many hours of games has this kid played? You know? And it was savage because it was not his choice. That's the thing. Many things that happen to the person, it's not your choice. Literally, it's nature. What are you going to do about the weather? Blame it on your ancestors? It's like, no. This cousin of mine, of course, he's incredibly intelligent. That's why I'm fascinated. Maybe like there was an advantage to the phone as well, but I don't know. I feel it was a disservice to my cousin for my aunt letting him. But what I mean by that is children are being exposed to waves of data and a lot of data at the same time. And there's something strange that it's like the internet doesn't have a rating, right? So it's like we don't say it's like every young child can use the internet. You know, it's like there is no age parameter where the child has even experienced enough concepts, knows enough concepts about human living to then engage into the cyberspace. Because it's like there are no laws on cyberspace, and it's kind of like there shouldn't be. There should be behavioral laws on the discretion of the human being. So what does that mean? That means after our, so, let me say it like this: people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, they walked towards freedom. In their eyes, there was a world that was free. When you go listen to Martin Luther King's speech, his speeches on YouTube, when he says, I have a dream where my daughters are they're judged by their character, not the color of their skin, I was getting goosebumps to such a level because I could see the honesty of that being in what he saw. Do you know? And so we are moving towards the era of the advanced communicators. We're moving to a totally new relationship with language as a species, and now is the hour. Now is the final hour. Now is the darkest hour of our species. Now is we are the pioneers of the next 1,000 years. We shouldn't be too distracted by media. We should be building civilization. And so what that means is if you, as a human being, helped put one brick in the greatness of your civilization, you have done your task. I say every person should spend 10% of their life just being like, all right, let me try this. Let me just wonder that if the civilization was a system, was in some sense this grand kingdom in the cosmos. Because even though the kings are long gone, and so right now it's like, I mean, the kings are not gone. But I'm saying like monarchy is not celebrated like before. Monarchy has become part of the old world. But our species stands in its kingdom, the human kingdom. If extraterrestrials attacked and came to our walls, it's as if it's like the roar of the children of man will rise. But what I mean by that is a sense of bondship. It's like it doesn't get more natural than that. All those nature lovers, all those people hugging trees, hug trees in your minds. So what I mean by that is that let yourself wonder that there could be a chance the purpose of a natural being is to function naturally. So what does that mean? That means I have had certain altered states of kind of observing the speed of my thoughts. And when thoughts become like thoughts have a direction, okay? Sometimes when I speak, these thoughts, most of them, they're not directed at me. Let me tell you what I mean by that. That means I am seeing a world. In talks where I don't see a world, my attention comes to the self. And in moments where suddenly, like I've had moments where I've given these talks and suddenly I've just felt like a wave of silence hit me. Imagine like a gust of wind, like wind just blows to you, but it's not wind, it's silence in the mind behind. So what it is learning to acknowledge elemental reality as an unknown observer. That's life, guys. It's like people are not shapes. They are a living shape, a changing shape. So it's all fun and games. This is why the ultimate resolution of behavior is like, yo, I was thinking, I was thinking, how do we make a utopia that's not boring? And I realize the chaos has to be alive, but it has to have a different flame. What that means is something that was savageness in the past. It's like you look at our ancestors, they were savage back in the day, they would kill each other. Now people are killing each other with their words. They're killing each other's egos all the time. A person in traffic who's shouting at another person. I mean, so many people in Western countries don't know how in third world countries, because the streets aren't safe, there's so much fighting. Fighting over what? It's like two donkeys coming to in front of each other, and instead of continuing their road, the donkeys are like fighting. So what can you say? Man is still animalistic, and I thought, why? And I because let me tell you guys, I noticed something crazy that it's like there is some people who really think life is a good place. They have the perception that the fundamental axiom of human nature is to be good, to be a being that is good. It's as if certain chaotic archetypes, they are in a good world. What does that mean? That means there are this is going to be in no this I feel I'm taking this too far, but I wanted to say, imagine in the lesser worlds, I'm being playful here, but imagine in the lesser worlds, imagine this world was multidimensional, right? Imagine we're in the middle. Imagine this world was multidimensional, but we were explaining it as if it was on a Cartesian plane. So imagine an X and Y axis, right? So the lesser worlds. As we go into the lesser worlds, it's as if beings in the lesser worlds, there are some who are, their attention is stuck on, they are in a lesser world, their attention is stuck on the lesser world. There are some in the lesser world where their attention is also on the upper worlds. Let me say it like this, I think it's better. It's so the bottom worlds are kind of like the person in the lesser world, the creature is like unconscious or conscious that it's unconscious, you know. But and in the higher worlds, there are beings who are aware of the higher world, and there are beings who are aware of worlds lesser. I'm trying to say that both extremes, both archetypes, one painted by light, one painted by darkness, these archetypes are reflections of one another coming to a center that is attributeless. So imagine you think you're a good person. Guess what? Your subconscious is acting as a bad person right now. If you think you're a bad person, your subconscious is acting as a good person right now. But if you just simply be here, simple, in a moment of silence, the cosmos was its own meaning. That is what is called the divine glance, the divine vision. It means man's eyes have remembered they were never man. They're a field. Sorry to break it to you guys, but I fundamentally feel the mind is a field of intelligence. So it's hilarious. Personalities are just illusions. It's too collective to be separate, and this is the kind of state of mind. So I might be one of the very few people, I think, on this planet who is giving strangely a green light to how technology in the future becomes something where all our minds get connected to. I'm giving that green light due to a realization that behind, even if we didn't, we either stick in the illusion of individualism or we go experience the collectivity somehow, or even if we could reverse engineer, go backwards to kind of like before individualism, it comes to a collective place. So what I mean is we're oscillating between a drop in the ocean, and the ocean in the drop, as Rumi would say. This Sufi poets. The Sufis were geniuses. It's hilarious. They were so casual, acting like holy men, but they were actually like incredible, what I call insighters. Insighters are kind of like fighters of vision. you know they are beings who I find insight. They have become aware of what is happening during their sight as themselves. I'm telling you, the world is so hilarious because it is so not evolved. It is waiting. There are so many things waiting for man. This is kind of the notion of the gift. That means there is a gift that is already open, which is you. So be grateful for this gift. Oh my God, you're here. Surprise. But then there's another gift, and it is the gift of the world that is here to be engaged with. Life can't have too much subjective meaning. That means that so many religions were trying to be escape routes out of a temporary life by repainting a subjectivity where the behavior's repetition created a state of mind where in that non-dual vision there was no creator or creation when it was all one moment. So what it means is constant dance between conceivable and inconceivable. And another way of saying this is that before you were here, you were being here. Being the here and now. It's like you can't come to the here and now because you're being it. There we go. That's the solution to the mystical Rubik's Cube. I find that we have to use what is accessible. This is what I mean. We can't point fingers because we need every being. It's kind of like Mr. Within is realizing there's a strange war occurring. And listen very playfully here when I say war. I call this the war of language, the language wars. Now, what does this mean? That means after man began fully established in language, and this truly got momentum after nationalism. Because there were many dialects, but it was only through the identities of nations being born, nations rising from the dirt, that a language came. So it was eventually the sign, as a sophisticated language was the sign of a powerful civilization. You know, it's as if don't just go buying Porsches, don't go just buying like Ferraris. You know, also invest in your inner vehicle, in your inner technologies. And what that means is we're trying to figure out in this constant waves of storification. Like, what's hilarious? Even if you acknowledge a Buddhist perspective of By Buddhist, I mean a sort of infinite, manifest kind of game. This infinite hamster wheel of a transmigrating soul, lost in confusion and clarity, and found in clarity. Too much data, too much personification. It's like, imagine right now the mind is like a cell. What does the mind do? What do our basic cells do? Since just like as we see in the medical practices and the development of the fetus, we see cells expanding by copying themselves. And when a person enters a tribe, what they see of everyone else is themselves. This is such a shocking but fascinating kind of breath of fresh air. When the person realizes how loud the voice of their mind was. There are times where it's like, I remember sometimes when I was trying to sleep, like sometimes when I have too many, like thoughts are moving really fast in my experience. When I sleep, as if that momentum, I can still feel the winds, the rivers of thought moving. So in that moment, it's as if like it's kind of like I've looked at my own mind and been like, can you keep it down? And what I mean by that is that again, the known weather, unknown weather. In front of your eyes, life must be engaged. Behind your eyes, it must be observed. You don't have hands for the mind. The mind doesn't have hands. The mind has attention as its closest limb. So what I mean by this is why I realized this thank God I realized this early on, you know, that I realized early on the importance of slightly, not completely, having people revert their attention to an awareness and maintaining their distance with language and thought. It doesn't mean this is why the Vipassana movement is getting momentum simply because they're just saying what the ancients did: be quiet and the world's voice will be heard. But if you're searching, you will hear your own voice. There is a quote that says, when the child is born, the child cries, but the world laughs and smiles. The world's like, oh my God, a new being is here. That's next level, you know. And the second part of the quote is that when the child dies, in other words, when the man dies, when the human being transitions into subjective realms of dissolution of the objective phenomena, it's like death will, sorry to intervene here, but like what I mean by that is, I'm going to get back to the quote. I just want to say that I find that death is going to shock the mind, shock the consciousness, because it's going to change quicker than thought. It's going to change quicker than thought, and it's going to shock the attention in the subjective realm. So what I mean by that is, how are you observing your body? Your body is a natural phenomena. Your free will and your how much organization or various how much of a design and how much your mind can extract a blueprint of survival from the world? I don't know how to say it, but we're going to realize heaven is behind our eyes at some point. Anyways, guys, I'm going to say the quote again. The child is born. I'm going to say it. I think this is actually, maybe it was a good thing. I got to say it. Maybe this is, I think this is the exact way the quote is. When the child is born, the world laughs, the world celebrates, and then the child cries. The child's like, oh my God, where am I? And the world's like, welcome, And so, and then when the child dies, the world cries. The world cries. The world sees a great building arose and now it has collapsed. But even though the world cries, now the child laughs. The liberated attention smiles, for it has conquered change endlessly. For we have closed our eyes to open them again. What is there to fear? Fear dies too. The Sufis were next level. They would say to die before you die. Imagine being this like a new guy to their kind of ideology back in that day, and it's like, so what are you guys teaching here? And the Sufi's like, to die before you die. And then, the guy's like, okay, wrong building. But what the Sufis meant was to liberate, to free. Because most people want freedom from the objective realm. They want freedom from their mind. But you don't realize it doesn't work that way. You got to give freedom and then your mind gives you freedom. And to be honest, that's the efficient way with dealing with karma. I don't know what else other types of yoga and affirmations are doing. I think that's kind of strange. I think life is not about repetition too much. Or what's the point of evolution? Evolution is the only crevice in the wall of history that could never be challenged. What I mean by that is something remains in this room of manifestation, and I treat it as a room. It's another way of saying treating it as a dream. So I'm saying it, guys, to the mind, it's like you're either a body howling a brain, which is projecting a mind, or you are a mind projecting a body that can even consider. So that relationship with the unknown behind your eyes is, to be honest, really reaching the edge of knowledge. And the edge of knowledge doesn't mean to stop knowing. I am not uh, hitting the scholar with his own ruler. It's just that there's something amazing here, and it should be attempted. And that was the evolution. That's why the mind became multi-purposed. It's not just for survival. Survival got boring. Then it became from attaining the most like pleasant state of mind. And because this pleasant state of mind thing has gone so far, we're having people sitting on mountains of gold, not realizing their civilization is calling them. There's a strange voice in nature. There's a strange voice in nature where it's as if I remember, I think it was like I was walking in like this park and I saw like this trash that was kind of like I think it was like a leftover chocolate bar on the ground. And I didn't care at first. And then something intuitively kind of told me, pick this up. Can you imagine like your intuition telling you to pick up trash? I was like, my ego, my divine ego was so offended. So I pick up the trash and then I leave. And later on, I'm like, wait a minute. Maybe the content of that was not for creatures. Maybe that was too much sugar for animals. Like, you know? And so that's the thing. So, and like another time, this kind of the logo spoke to me. What I mean by that, I'm kind of animating it. To be honest, it's just intuitive knowing. I don't know. It doesn't have a shape. It's just emotional action, instantaneous emotional action, and not just emotion, but the emotion is there. So another moment where I remember it was Birmingham, UK, and I was going to the ATM. You know. And as I was going in the morning, I noticed there was this sign that was broken, and I don't know how to tell you. Imagine like wooden rectangular sign, which had information from a construction place, but this wooden sign, the wood had broken. So this broken kind of sign had literally one third of it, like a bit more than one third of it, outside on the street, right at the edge of an intersection, right? So as if it was as if like imagine a right angle and imagine from like one side when the thing's about to turn, that's where the wooden thing is, right? So it's like in that moment I just run, and I was kind of like I was so like just like there wasn't any thought to the day yet, you know? And so I just run and I pick this up. I picked this up and I just pulled it. To be honest, I couldn't pick it up. I just pulled it to the side where the edge of it wasn't on the street. I just pushed it out of the street. And right that, like literally maybe like 20 seconds later, like this van came. And the van was coming at a slow speed where I'm like, okay, this van probably is not nothing's gonna happen. But I felt like, maybe like I saved a tire. I don't know. I saved the life of a tire, tire of a car, But anyways, it was a moment of intuitive abidance. You don't know, like guys, like there were 3 years where I had a sort of relationship with my subjective realm that was shape based, in like too deeply, too much. It was like, how can I tell you? It was like I was at the logos. Imagine Socrates acknowledged the logos within him as the inner oracle. So imagine Socrates has gone to the inner oracle and he's like, imagine he's closed his eyes and he's meditating, and the inner oracle's like, Socrates has gone to the inner oracle and he's like, inner oracle, what should I do? And the inner oracle's like, okay, go do that, you know? And Socrates is like, no, but inner oracle, what else should I do? And the inner oracle is like, what are you standing here asking me? It's your life. I'm the guide here. Not the tour guide, but the kind of like, um, how can I tell you? It's as if like we are here to express the free will. And I find through a sort of playfulness, as Buddha would say. I mean, Buddha, I don't think he said playfulness, but he said the middle way. I mean, that's close enough. Welcome, Idris and Ed Daytona. It's kind of, guys, I mean, feel free to share any thoughts, anybody who's listening on this in the chat section. But pretty much I found it kind of fascinating that language wasn't just even like an on and off switch kind of evolutionary thing. It was something that we had inner phenomena occurring before external phenomena. This is why the inner phenomena could organize. That means, to be honest, when the first decision was made, it was like all the decisions of man's mind was made. It was like a certain avenue was walked. Okay. Sorry, guys. There was too much noise outside the window. So, sometimes we need noise control in this world. Inner noise. But what I'm trying to get to, and hopefully my voice is clear enough, is that we are creatures that our intelligence is based on becoming familiar with patterns. Okay, there's patterns everywhere. Every object you look, it's like that object, the symbol of it is in a sort of system, right? Symbols don't exist alone, they live in a system. For example, the alphabet can be said to be a system, you know? And so eventually, the classification of these systems, people walk the mountain differently. Some people's minds numerically walk it. For me, it's geometric. Some people, it's just pure language oriented. Some people, it's as if their mind doesn't need a thought, they're already beyond it. So it's one of those things where if you are in the human dimension, at least contribute to the collective vision. And in hunter-gatherer societies, like constantly, guys, like the whole point of this episode is I'm taking my attention constantly to how was it then? How was it then? What was the significance of these people in a tribe speaking, communicating? Eventually, it came to the development of a sort of system of behavior. This system of behavior got a certain enough value. It's like a snowball effect. There was enough repetition of certain behaviors that commonalities were subjectively made. These subjective commonalities, which were pinpointed through sound, eventually began having, it was like there was a relationship with first man being able to say the word. Then it was the evolution of tone, where the emotion comes into adjusting and moving the intensity of the language, right? So it's like language is a very fascinating thing. I call it an advanced technology because it has unknown dimensions, and if it didn't, there'd be no point of it evolving. It's like so like sure. It's like the moment you realize the world is made of atoms, you're like, great, I get it. Atoms and emptiness. That's life. But I saw that. What next? And this mentality of what next is simply not to forget what was there before, but kind of to continue it. So, an incredible effort of continuity. Something became fascinating. And honestly, if it wasn't experiential oriented, it wouldn't continue. So, what do I mean? That means language evolved because it was cool enough. Do you believe that? Because it was exciting enough experientially to engage. Because at some point our ancestors dropped the sword and picked up the pen and began writing their minds. And at least their minds went to war, not their bodies. Right? But now we're in a civilization where, because the system has become so complex, and really the exponential growth of technology literally means to a lot of data is being hitting people. So another way means that you got to climb your way out of this ocean of various information and how certain things are in certain forms, and find yourself, and then find your vision. You see, there is no such thing as like the self-help industry is ironic. Do you know it's called self-help, but actually it's someone else's words. How are you helping yourself? And that question is free of charge. You don't need to pay anyone to put a mirror in front of you. Because the person who's actually seen beyond that mirror, that person will instantly give it free of charge. Let me tell you why. Because the value of the shift of efficiency over whatever person the personality animates. Like efficiency takes precedence because it's we have to act as the mind of the civilization as individual members of it. Pretty much, it's like our care level is at maybe like 14%. I think people care like 14% of their day, they maybe care about the world. Some people, it's much higher. For that Buddhist monk, that Tibetan Buddhist monk in which compassion has become the ultimate door, it's like you can say it's like a much higher percentage. I find that civilization can playfully be seen as a generator. Now, this generator has three parts. It has a part that is endlessly starting. It is the introduction of the new. So think of the system, so many children are being born. Now imagine the second part of this generator of civilization's existence. This generator, the second part is change. So there are certain things that it's not like they're being new and it's not like they're leaving, they're just changing, transforming, right? So it's like a sort of entrance and then a journey and then an exit, right? That's pretty much how life is, guys. If we at least if we try to see it temporarily, as a temporary being. Um, to be honest, the discussion about what constitutes the eyes of an eternal being is beyond conception. So really. And the third is the ending. That means a story is not a story without a beginning, middle, and end. Strange, isn't it? So a part of the generator of civilization success ends with the discretion and wisdom, the wisdom to stop, the wisdom to begin, and the wisdom to transform. You can say these can be seen as three diamonds of the future, three diamonds for the future civilization. You'll realize it at some point. It's like you got to make the best use of the mind, but its utility shouldn't be obsessive and blind, like and too much instinctive. So what it means is that it means one has to at least bring themselves to enough of a peaceful environment where the attention in the moment is not in pieces. Clarity is instantaneous. Think about it. Think about it. It's kind of like finding a treasure, is it not? This truth that people seek. It's like there's a treasure, I'm going to find it. So the person goes, and the reception of the treasure is an instant. That moment you open the box, it's like treasure received. It's like achievement unlocked, and that's it. It's an instantaneous truth. So instantaneity means there's ways that your experience is functioning that has nothing to do with any sort of abstraction in space and time, any sort of phenomenology. It's the instantaneous gaps. Think of it this way. Just like how we have spaces between words in a sentence, think about it as if there are certain gaps in time. These gaps in time render a multidimensional scale. This is the only reason why we feel every day is a new day, you know? Because it's like things started, things changed, the journey was completed, and eventually the person sleeps. Some days it's like I kind of, my whole mentality is like just get through the day. Because I remember hearing this saying, and it came from, to be honest, the Eastern traditions, from kind of Islamic wisdom. And the idea was that um, the breath is like the gift of God and it can leave in any instant. So imagine that the curtain can be pulled in this performance of your life. So what does that mean? That means the actor's like, oh my God, the curtain can be pulled any moment. So let me do the greatest performance I can, you know? Because we are an actor of some story. I mean, we can't ignore our personalities. I'm just saying we need to also be aware of what's beyond them, which is an experiential kind of remembrance. So I find just the fact that people realize there were inner dimensions behind another person's eyes that it's like communication would arise from, that space becomes respected as the highest resource. That means human beings are right now very primitive and behaviorally. We're very primitive, but I find it'll get to a point where we will not, just like how Martin Luther King was like, I want my my children not to be judged by the color of their skin, but by the nature of their character, something like that. Mr. Within is saying, I find we're eventually going to reach a point where we're not going to look at people and just see bodies there. We're going to look at people and see unknown presences of mind. The only way of establishing a unity is to realize we are comrades in an ultimate war. It's as if Mr. Within is saying, forget human violence. It's as if our thoughts are fighting with each other first. So eventually, our relationship with thought and the nature, just literally how aware the future generations are that their self is not just a concept, it's a dynamic experience. Your attention is the god of your thought. So the secrets of the universe are in how your attention is present. I am telling you, this is the only thing to study. How the attention has been moving since day one, or day ad infinitum. So, anyways, guys, anybody who has any comments or ideas they want to share, I can definitely engage. I need a quick break, but I'm here by the computer. Because the tribe had to respond, because the hunter gatherer society had to respond to, they had to acknowledge their dead. To acknowledge their dead meant they had to acknowledge there was a value after death, before death. This value would be taken away. I find the psychological view was like fire, as if a flame is lit. The human, that this was perhaps maybe the profoundest philosophical perception of these hunter-gatherer societies, that what was in front of them became their metaphors for life. You see, if you go ask a blacksmith, which god would you choose out of the bundle? And the blacksmith would say, do not disrespect Thor. You go ask, it's as if a writer sees the whole universe being written. A painter sees the ultimate as a sort of being painted into manifestation. So the profession, what is in the environment, really becomes the metaphors. At some point, you lift off, you pilot even beyond the language, and the unknown moves at that point. So there's no psychological attachment to any outcome. There literally is no psychological point of reference in certain states where the body is still and the subjective ripples on the pond of the mind are kind of settled. When that's settled, it's strange because then it's as if it's kind of weird. It's like it's empty attention prior to subjective phenomenological value in attention. So I'm what it is I'm noticing that there are certain subtleties and how much the mind of man works with dualities. And so I think that these proto languages were eventually the solidification of common dualities, common axes that the people could see the moment to be on. And an axis has two sides. In other words, what I mean is there's a dualistic nature. So it's as if some people feel the wheels of karma, it's like one wheel. Some people feel these are the dualistic gears, all the phenomenology of the mind in the dualistic dimensions. It is vast beyond conception. It's like, think about every star that can die to be an axis. So it's like there's endless these subjective axes that we put upon objectivity, right? Because it's like before, it's like you honestly, what is discovery, guys? It's pretty much people noticing something that's happening and being like, let's call it this, you know? But of course, with articulation, that means an artistic approach to honor design's advancement. Sometimes you got to live for the idea. That means you got to put away your own story and learn from other stories. And sometimes you got to actually, be conscious of your story, you know? Especially those people in power. It's like nobody tell the president to go meditate. It's like in a cave in the for 3. Imagine a president of a country is like, all right, I'm leaving office and I'm going to go meditate for 3 months. 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days. And eventually, imagine this president comes back and is like the most enlightened president. But what I'm saying is, there needs to be the maintenance. There needs to be what that means is it's like there's something with power that many people don't know. There's something in the kind of psychological framework of the master kind of servant dynamic that is sad for both ends. It's like you were just looking at our primitive ancestors, not realizing what they were doing. And what it is power gets chained to what it enslaves. It has to hold the leash, and the one it is the servant that is enslaved has to be leashed. So all of this relies on the inner liberation of the master. So it's like the world is a cruel place because I'm saying this very respectfully, but it's as if the creator hasn't gotten its cognition yet. It's an exploration. We are in the trenches in this language war, wondering about like what's happening next. And the best thing is, just like how they say the wise man, you know, plants a tree in which he's not going to be alive to sit under its shade. Simply, we must plant thoughts and directives and patterns like trees. We must plant natural ideology. It's what I call an evolutionary return to nature, but it's going to occur in our inner realms and then it's going to occur in our outer. So one thing I personally thought this has to become mandatory, that this is one of Mr. Within's kind of commands of the educational system, that every child before graduating must plant a tree. That means every child they have to plant a tree in front of others, the whole school or something, you know. So planting, in some sense, 12 trees before you can graduate. And it goes on to be the same in higher realms of education, because it's so important to constantly have man return to his simple principles. Even the most advanced minds, stretching from Elon Musk to various scientists, they say you got to bring life down to simple principles. This is why the atheist can really easily, like a wrestling move, slam the theist to the ground. Why? Because the atheist takes it back to such a simple principle that it was prior to any story necessary, so all stories can be literally become punching bags, right? So in other words, this is why the atheist eventually has to hide under the wing of updates in science. So what I mean by that is like nobody really knows, and we're fighting over language. Like one what like to be honest, it's like the when world leaders fight, it's like all right, one advanced mammal in one part of the world made a noise, and another advanced mammal in another part of the world made a noise, and then oh, unfortunately, millions of people died in the world wars. How unfortunate! Do you understand how simple the solutions are to human survival? And it's just to realize that now it's becoming the same hunter-gatherer society is emerging, but it's emerging as minds, and minds are not embodied, so we have to create archetypes. So it's becoming a unique point in history where we have to at least try to contemplate. It's like a command, just like how in the movie 2012 they went and asked all the wielders, all the designers, like the wielders, to come and help build these ships for the end of the world. So it's as if now we are requiring kind of every designer, okay, to begin contributing to this design. And what is this design? This design is not an idea. It's not a belief system. It's simply when you look in the mirror and you ask yourself, what am I here for? You see a civilization that's endured and needs assistance. That's it. That's it. And the civilization doesn't have like that means even if there was, let's say 8 billion people were like, whoa, we're super conscious. Let's do the right thing. Is the right system in place? No. So the issue is not just people changing, but also the right inner technologies to be implemented. And right now we're at a war where we have to still go to the educational system and be like, all right, let's talk about consciousness. Unfortunately, because our knowledge can only be communicated through language, every observation is limited to language. Language was a spark of our own creation. So on some level, we are selling sounds in air, but on another level, these sounds can find patterns. But the educational system, instead of inspiring the child, imagine the child goes to the educational system and the child has come from the most roughest kind of situation, right? I find this is what should occur. Educational systems should become kind of strangely like hotels. There should be a hotel at the center of every, not like an accommodation, a kind of hotel in every library. Do you know? Because the scholar doesn't have time to hold the sword. This is why the world needs to also defend itself. This is why it's like the king protected the freedom of the peasant in his kingdom. Oh my God, my laptop's gonna die. Sorry guys, I just had to save the life of my digital voice for a second. It's pretty much, think of it this way. Every profession has a successor, a sort of succession line, a sort of lineage. Okay. When you go see a lot of people's last names and cultures, some of them come down to not being actually the name of the guy. The guy had no name. The guy was just someone who would kind of like, um, what do you call it, sell perfume. And so that's why they called him Attar. You know, Attar isn't the dude's real name. It was his profession. It was his role. It was his social, it was his culture archetype found in the cultural program that defined him, you know. So when we say Attar of Nishapur, which is a very, he's this Persian poet, which is very well known for having one of some of the most heaviest and fascinating and unknown kind of mystical poetry written. And he's a Sufi dervish, of course, and he was alive, what is it, like 900 years ago or something? Probably less, but beyond games of identification with temporary phenomena in space comes the true presence. And the true presence will have enough freedom, So I feel the job of this talk is done if the listener realizes they have had a freedom that was there from the beginning. Nothing, what are you looking for in space and time? Which every glance is a subjective projection of its own. So we have to become more acquainted. It's like our head is too much in in the language simulation. And as our attention kind of maintains its distance, imagine what it means is you imagine you're standing by the side of a street having a phone call, and cars are passing by, and you're experiencing that polluted atmosphere. So now, good to maintain your distance. Literally walk away from that space and observe again, and you always have the ability to walk back. So you see, you will only feel free when you feel you can't make mistakes, as long as you feel you're an ego. And the way to go around that is to realize that it doesn't matter if you make a mistake, because even if you make a mistake, people don't have your eyes, so they will never see your mistake the way you saw it. So this is why they say learn from your mistakes, because that's the only thing you can do. I find all of these tied together in the sense that there comes this new ethos. It's as if the logos came and the great philosophies were introduced to the world. And now it is the time of kind of like the poets. And when I say poets, I mean literally the archetype of the human being caring enough to communicate their inner realm. That means what is better than a person trying to speak is a person where there's it's something strange, where the subjective realms phenomenology and the objective realms phenomenology are moving at the same speed. All right, guys. Pretty much, I'm in this talk just to clear up. Um, I give myself the freedom of like a painter that would give himself like an empty canvas to draw on. So what it is that I'm trying to see how hunter-gatherer societies, where there was a sort of catalyst of a sort of enough of a value system of an experiential excitement for them to continue language. And I found that based on the temporary nature of the animal, it was as if the stories of the animal began becoming one of change, right? So it was the acknowledgement of value and then the disappearance of value. The disappearance of value. A creature is born, it has the it arises into the appearance of a value, a social tribal value, and then it, in some sense, fades away. You know, you step out of nature as kind of the human being, and at some point you return to nature. And whatever it is, I find it's like that moment when the physical transition out of this reality comes. One must not give it a story, as the sages say. Honestly watch where your world is going. The future will be doubted if the present is being avoided. The past will be doubted if the present is being avoided. If the present avoids itself, the infinite spectrum of worlds occur. We are creatures that are realizing we are in our inner space, clothed in language and image. And geometry, I've started to talk about it because I don't feel people are talking about it enough. That we have to dare find our honesty. At least here's the idea: find your honest self, experience that, then choose to be dishonest. Because I am telling you, there is oftentimes when the mind functions in an unfamiliar state too much, you know, it doesn't know how to orient itself subjectively. So think of every exploration being a challenge behind the eyes of the explorer of a transformation of value. And guys, feel free to share anything in these talks. I'm kind of trying to like see how some sort of collective narrative needs to be established. It's like, think of it this way: the world is right now acting in accordance to a certain program, to a certain pattern. What that means is, even though we may not have the strength to change the program, but it means there was nothing and then a program was chosen. So just when one thing is chosen, you suddenly realize, why wasn't the other thing? That other thing is the unknown potential of the mind to endlessly, let's say, abstractize. Abstracticize itself. I just, let's create that word here. I find we're all in search of an ultimate solution or a pattern. It's like, believe it or not, Lord of the Rings kind of situation. That one ring to rule them all. It's like every person, I find, fundamentally is trying to find that one vision to rule them all. Now, regardless of their motives, whether it's animalistic instincts, whether it's an emotional tendency, or calling, or whether it's a sort of intellectual pursuit. You can approach the world in many ways. There's this poet named Rumi. He says there's 10,000 ways to kneel down and kiss the earth. That means there is so many ways the moment can be experienced. And here's the funny thing: in order for any ideological system, if we treat it as a ship, okay, as a ship, all ideas right now, everything I'm saying, all these words that is in the minds of people, um, these are consciousness is like a boat moving in an unconscious ocean. So this consciousness that is on this boat, what that means is what is found in your attention remains as a value in the human vision. So what does that mean? That means after some point, it's not about finding the right thought, finding the right truth. What's the next truth that people are selling I should buy? It's like, that's not, we're not window shopping for truth here. You know, what it is actually a sort of, it is the dark side of truth, that chaos can be used for chaos or it can be used for order. When man finds a way to transform his civilization by painting a new story where it's as if you don't have time to be a thug in a street. You don't have time to psychedelically uh, entertain yourself in certain virtual realms. You can say that the shamans had built virtual reality machines by just ingesting a certain plant. And so, for how long can one endure in the story of their life? So, eventually, change is acknowledged. There's a story about consciousness. To be serious, it all comes down to consciousness. We're conning ourselves if we don't think that. Jesus Christ, my mouse pad is like, I think this laptop is getting close to retirement. Just a second, guys. I'm trying to look for a song. I usually play songs as I speak. So, all right, there we go. I think the discovery of another human mind for the creature evolved it in such a intense way. Because really, survival seems to be a personal thing, doesn't it? Survival seems to be a solo thing. And all of collective morality deteriorates into individual morality. That means the conscience of the person will either listen to the voice of their instinct, or they will listen to the voice of their conscience, or if they're wise, they will realize they are the voice of the moment. The mind of man is simply literally like attention catapulting towards phenomenology. There's various, like your mind is moving at such higher speeds that if you were to see it, there would be a curvature to subjectivity. This is why I entertain the notion of that it's like a sphere of thought. I've dedicated this book to this that's called The Inventor's Sphere. Hopefully, it will meet the light of day. But anyways, guys, I'm kind of reaching the end of this point. Pretty much, my finding comes down to this: that language is the program of the mind, direct experience is the programmer is attributeless, the program has attributes, the attributeless is existential, the attributes are experiential. The experiential is temporary, the existence is eternal. Existence is eternal in the way that it is such an instantaneous moment of being. Prior to anything happening, this being is required for stuff to happen in. It is the origin of non-conception. It is the creation of the word non-existence. And whoever in some sense truly helped in establishing the word non-existence, take a bow, because you have in some sense given the philosopher something to talk about. beyond the skies of language, the pilots of consciousness, and in the era of advanced communication, they will pilot. Pretty much, we're in a plane of existence. If the being is wise and serious about life, that means you got to seriously look at life. That means if you choose to be a material being, if you dare say you're a material being, you have to look at matter closely. So realize that a person in a secular society most likely would consider imagination as a hallucination, and will consider imagination that reflects reality to not be a hallucination. But I am telling you, the world is more mysterious than our thoughts. The unknown truly is found on an experiential thing. That's the whole point, by the way. This is why you really can't have a teacher, because your eyes have to evolve inside out, you know, rather than the other way. So what does that mean? That means the remembrance of attention. So what does that mean? That means I want you to imagine there's like the Yoga Patanjali Sutras uses this metaphor of a glass orb moving around colored surfaces. So I want you to imagine there's 8 billion glass orbs that can speak to one another, and each of them are sitting on a different color. And eventually these glass orbs are like, so guys, what are we? You know? And then they realize they have the same sort of transparency in nature. So what that means is Carl Jung realized that the unity of man's mind is in the true acknowledgement of the collective unconscious, because once the collective unconscious holds within it all our personal senses of not knowing. So everything I don't know and everything you don't know and everything everyone else doesn't know is in the same space. That's what the collective unconscious implies. And that space can be intelligent or cannot be. These are, again, like Carl Jung pretty much every writer leaves behind a book of, at least in my eyes, geometry. Everything has geometry is a language. What does that mean? Everything can be translated into it. You can even, like, consume soup and see geometry in that moment. You know, the instantaneous awareness of design is always a kind of spontaneous, has a spontaneous divine atmosphere to it. Because only when you learn to be your simple self, then no complexity can burden you. This is why Leonardo da Vinci, to be honest, said simplicity is the most ultimate sophistication, because the sophisticated, where else can it go? It eventually has to remember where it started from. This is kind of the honor of kind of like we find kind of in the father archetype and in the son archetype. The son acknowledged, the efforts of energetic existence. So what that means is it's as if children are born eventually realizing they require to care for the mind of another human being. So now there's 8 billion of us. So what does that mean? That means on some level we should have stories of love and celebration and hugging and having fun, but that's one city. And then we should also have engineers and pilots and various designers kind of attempting to rebuild the collective narrative. So what does that mean? Kind of, I say this poetically in one of my writings, is we have to defend the lovers of this world. When I say lovers, I mean just the care of one mind for another mind to have ultimate freedom. That care is literally like, I'm telling you, the greatest gift you can give people is freedom for their reality to be present. We search for life in phenomena. When we notice the phenomena is actually just atoms in space, we see it's an object, we realize the search was subjective from the beginning. Then the mind becomes acknowledged. So then when we have the acknowledgement of this mind, we, we I think the moment attempts to observe the stillness of thought. And really what it is attention hovering in a moment that is manifest. And a certain range of this manifest moment, which is your objective body, this is in your control, how unique. Certain atoms you command. When my hand goes to get a glass of water, it's as if the armies of the cells in my body are all listening. So what I mean by that is like a certain atomic relationship with reality. It's very fascinating. It's cool being part of a conscious particle in space. But now the consciousness is not just from the particle, which means a new cultural programs should update in a new way. Literally, iTunes updates. So, so our whole cultural system and just pattern should update. And the way it's going to update is that we're going to realize our bodies could have been born in certain nations, but the mind is non-local. The mind can't own land. You're just this hovering attention. What are you going to own? You know? So a civilization based on the decency to realize we are the expression of a field of intelligence. Like no person can be said to not be intelligent. If you're moving, you're the smartest creature in the world. If there's something occurring in your moment, you're the smartest creature in the world. You know, there's no other bar after that. You know, that means you're active in the field of existence, orchestrated with a sort of mindset that it's like chaos and order come and go. The sky is sometimes clear, sometimes clouded. Sometimes the objective state is maintained well, sometimes it's not maintained well. Sometimes it's like an inner vision can take so much of the attention of the person that they may feel it's like another life in their life is occupying the attention of their life. But what it is really you eventually, it's kind of like you can say nihilism. Nihilism is kind of like just stepping out of the building for a second and getting some fresh air. You know, a kind of resetting of the viewpoint. There's been many times. It's like I found it super hilarious, and I'll say this just to share it. Um, in certain old school spiritual traditions, they acknowledge the concept in the New Age community. There's certain people still acknowledging the concept of a walk-in. So walk-in was this idea, and even much more we go before that, there were in Shintoism, they saw the body as a vessel for not one soul, but like a highway of souls or whatever, right? So they kind of felt like our eyes were like the road of another dimension, you know, something like that, right? So one vessel and various like movement of souls in one vessel rather than one soul in one vessel. So the people in the New Age community, they acknowledge this concept of the walk-in as if the person had a near-death experience and they came back and they were like a totally new person, you know, and they're like, oh my God, this person is not the same person. Like literally, he's different. This person is different after, for example, that experience. And then we realize what it is to be honest, it's simply where the attention has been held. That means like literally tomorrow I could take my attention to calisthenics and try to practice parkour. Just have my whole attention, just forget about these talks and everything and just do parkour every day. Like that's good, you know. But it's like for how long am I going to be jumping over walls when there's subjective walls that the species needs to jump over to evolve? It's as if it's like you can use your body and you can use your mind. Your mind is pretty much self-awareness. Your body is expression in an ocean of phenomenology. It's like you are here too. So what it is it's microsensitivity to a macrocosmic kind of narrative, and realizing that they were, believe it or not, micro behaviors. What does that mean? Let me tell you what I mean by micro behavior. Right now, um, I grab this, like, you know, cup of water, let's say. Ah, that's good water. um, how would I say it? This microsensitivity is kind of like me thinking of wanting to grab the water, then in my mind thinking as if me grabbing something else. Just that's, or me thinking of grabbing the water with my left hand if I first wanted to grab it with my right hand. That parallel subjective vision of my hand in moving, it's like another parallel potential of the behavior is what I call a microsensitivity, and it has to do from preliminary, like it has to do with design, right? So for me, you see, some people start in the story realm and then they get introduced to the design realm. But some people start in the design realm and then they enter the story realm. So the whole point is about, like, are you seeing design first, or you're seeing the story, the meaning first, right? I don't know how to say it actually. What it is it's a sensitivity to existential design, and how only it is in the conscious waking state where the candle of, like, this, like, flickering flame of consciousness is lit throughout the day, you know. Like, this attention is like, guys, it's fascinating. Every day happens once. Every day happens once. What can you do? You gotta have some sort of the mind has to, I find the greatest thing, the most noblest thing the modern human being will do is that it will care for the inner reality of the species, and it will care to share its inner reality. Be fearless. It's like the stage is available only once. This is why shyness should be forbidden. Any person in society who's shy should be fined by the government. We have to inspire people to be comfortable communicating their inner realms, you know. The educational system is really important to be really efficiently redesigned, re-envisioned, because the mind of the child is too valuable to ignore. It's like, think of a surgeon, heart surgeon, or like a brain surgeon looking at that organ and being like, this is incredibly sensitive and valuable, and it's like the most kind of pure attention to try to do the right thing, right? As the surgeon works. So what it is like that kind of decency and precision, that sort of same sort of thing with one's thought. If you don't care for something, you'll forget it. That's the truth. So what it is build your relationships in life in accordance to what is natural to you, and then once you are in that, it's like once you are in that proper state of mind, life will properly happen. It's incredible the moment you snap out of the linguistic simulation and realize every moment has a sort of novelty factor to it. This ability for things to be new is the only reason. It's because there's the unknown here, right? So it's like, how can I tell you, as Dylan Thomas says, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. That rage is literally our civilization's greatest effort to remember where it's heading. We have to listen to the voice of the universal sector, but through our own minds. So only when you trust yourself, you will also trust what is beyond yourself. If you don't trust yourself, even if you see something beyond yourself, it's like, what use does it have? It's like when the person doesn't take responsibility for their mind, it's easy to just cower away as a meaningless attention in a body. Sometimes it's like that really you can't expect the kind of whole savior complex to arrive simply because it's like you're sitting on a chair and the savior, if the savior was here, the savior would just pull you out of the chair and you'd be like, wow, thanks, savior. But it's like the whole time you could have stood up. So that effort of your own stance, at least it's like, even if it's the final hour, it's as if the bird in the darkness still continues flying. And even though it's the darkest hour, the bird still continues. And when it doesn't have any more effort left, it has attained an ultimate state of mind. In that ultimate state of mind, it begins to feel the warmth of the sun. In the darkest moment of your life, the sun is coming after. It's like the sun is waiting in line. Glory is waiting after, defeat. It's kind of like the sun looking at the moon as if it's his daughter. If we could put like in like kind of in a unique way, make this abstract. And the sun looks at the actual sun looks at the moon and says, "My daughter, share your light." And the daughter says, "Is my light, or is it your light?" And the sun says to the moon, "When they look at you, they will see your light. But you know your light is the sun's light." And that's the, I think, ultimate relationship one can have. That's in that story, I find a great burden psychologically will be put down. Like literally, you're carrying a backpack filled with too many strict, heavy attention stuck based on certain snapshots of memory, emotional memory. Like you don't understand, emotions can trap a thought. That means I've spoken to people where the person is communicating to everyone he has a problem, right? And when you tell the guy, "Hey man, what's your problem?" right? The person just says how they are in the problem and doesn't even want to know the solution. And it's this weird kind of expressing sadness to the world vibe, you know? And so, what it appears to, I think, the outside world is that personal emotions are personal because there are certain ways you are experiencing the emotions alongside your own memories that the world can't see. So, it's the respect that every mind stands alone, yet it is also part of a field of intelligence. And just us being able to create some kind of cool, next level, kind of efficient story narrative that will inspire the civilization, the child, like any being that reaches close enough to the human mind, they will instantly realize the human mind is not waiting around. I remember sharing once in one of the talks, like this kind of story that human beings are like so occupied with their own vision and their own work, right? It's as if human beings, like, imagine how intense Da Vinci was working on his like designs. Human beings, the whole species is so fascinated by what it's going to do that everything's happening efficiently just to see how the epic future would happen. So now imagine, while human civilization is updating itself in this profound and clear way, imagine an extraterrestrial civilization comes, and the extraterrestrial civilization is like, "Yo," and they see human civilization is like advanced to some degree, but they see we're not even acknowledging the enemy at our doorstep. And this imagine evil extraterrestrial civilization is like alien extraterrestrial like civilization is like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why aren't these guys acknowledging we're here about to declare war on their species?" And eventually one of these guys goes, imagine, I'm just animating a story here. But imagine the guy goes and says, "Dear," like goes to one of the human species, he says, "Don't you guys see we're about to conquer you right now? Why are you guys still working on your own project? Like, don't you see we're at your doorstep declaring war?" And the human species says, "Go away, we're too busy." And the evil extraterrestrial civilization is like, what? That was so casual, you know? And the extraterrestrial civilization is like weirded out and they leave, you know? And that's how man avoids, you know, an extraterrestrial invasion, you know? You know, he's too occupied with his own vision and the universe will respect it. When you abide by your true nature, it's strange. I didn't understand this as a child because shyness occurs when the person doesn't have the proper view of themselves. That's the only reason. That's why you're afraid. When you find who you really are as a person, you are a simple presence of attention, and this attention animates a sort of mind through the sophistication of language, really storified, and that's where I'm kind of speaking to you. I'm speaking to you in the language simulation, which is a sort of divine next step of the kind of evolution of our existence as creatures. So this creature, it strangely came reached a point in evolution where it was as if like, whoa, 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 matter evolved to be a thought. And so the reason I'm saying matter evolved to be a thought, because all of this evolution led to the person, for example, going to a coffee shop and the coffee shop got person being like, um, what's your name? And like you say your name, you're a thought. It's as if all of that 4 billion year evolution. So in that moment, the creature is like, okay, this thought is me. Put my name on that cup. Do you see? So it's like matter evolved to be a thought. But now Mr. Within is saying we're evolving beyond thoughts. You know, and so we have to really attempt. So in your life right now, just try it out. Just try this out. Imagine it's one of those things you just try it out for a day and see what it is. It's as if tomorrow when you wake up, slow everything down in everything. Slow, like do everything at a very slow pace. Don't be worried if you're late. Just for one day, do this. Okay? Slow everything down. And in every action you have to do, whether it's making breakfast, whether it's kind of like going to work, whether it's like kind of going to a gathering, whatever it is, in every moment, instead of just kind of have this attitude where just if it's a moment where you have to do something, attempt your greatest effort and your true self is instantly there. True strength is not broken by external conditions. That's the difference between certain warriors back in the day. Some of them had already won behind their eyes, so they were fearless. But some had fear, and that fear wasn't a strong enough shield, you know. So, anyways, guys, if there's any thoughts on how people feel there's going to be deeper dimensions or different ways, like how else, like I kind of constantly think people are oscillating between being with everything and being alone, being everything, being alone, being everything, being alone. Like I honestly feel this is occurring. So what does that mean? Kind of like there was this person named Shir Nisargadatta Maharaj. She said, when I see it, like this quote was always so fascinating for me that I memorized it instantly. You know, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see that I am everything, that is love. And in between, my life moves. So I find a new wave of exploration of the unconscious must occur. For me, the way I found at least we can give this as a project is in some of my much earlier talks I spoke about something called the Great Work. The Great Work was literally every person attempts to bring their to express their inner library. So what does that mean? That means I feel every person on this planet, it should be mandatory for them to write a book. And a book that is about their true vision. And I feel there should be an institution that rewards this. We reward people contributing and sharing their inner data, you know, and more than just kind of like a certain market where ideas are welcomed and not welcomed. It's like, do you know how many great ideas are in the shadows of a kind of inefficient market? Markets must evolve too, you know, but sometimes competition slows down evolution. Or it sometimes, if the competition, both sides are fighting over the wrong thing, it's like the whole thing is wrong from the beginning. Competition against giants that are running the wrong way is even a bigger tragedy. You are alive on this planet, you know, serve it. Just 10% of your life, serve it at least. And I find the civilization is going to remember, like the future generations are going to remember themselves. I'll be right back, guys. I need a few minute intermission. Okay, guys, I'm back. Um, I think I just want to explain one more thing and I'll probably end the talk. Um, the attempt to speech led to a state of mind that became multidimensional. That means multiple purposes to the moment, various different degrees. It was as if first the relationship of the center of the circle with just a tiny degree, and then it became the relationship of a center of a circle with one degree and then another degree and then another degree, and so it's like something was first a dot and then it lines again, as I said before, kind of like intersecting this dot. I find that I'll end it off with this. Carl Jung says, unless we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we will call it fate. So that's pretty much, I think, the attempt of the human mind to communicate in its inner realms as a retaliation to the potential consequence of what he has set in motion. So it's kind of like eventually I find people, the greatest writers of this planet, philosophers of this planet, they become like birds, like eagles flying above the civilization, observing it. So what I mean by that is like sometimes you gotta care for something and then the meaning comes and then the purpose comes. And so care for the eyes that are open now, for all of them. Much blessings and namaste. And guys, just to say something, um, before I end off, I think if you look at the wallpaper I've chosen, I think that person who's that figure you see at the corner, left corner, like of the wallpaper, I think that person is looking at the Mr. Within logo. Language directs the attention. Much blessings, guys.